This time we'll have Judge Kay Loggis come up and introduce our guest speaker.
Thank you. I'm going to introduce Russell, and I'm going to say a few things. It says, our guest speaker today began his law enforcement career as a reserve deputy with the Tom Green County Sheriff's Office in 1977, and terminated when he retired as San Angelo's Chief of Police in 1999. Later, he was appointed as a Tom Green County Justice of the Peace on December the 31st, 2010. Oh, I'm sorry, he retired again on December the 31st, 2010. During his law enforcement career, he accumulated a wealth of law enforcement information, which led to his current occupation. He spent 5 years as an outdoor columnist for the San Angelo Standard-Times and several magazines. He is the author of several nonfiction novels. Just to list a few: The Gun That Wasn't There, No Reason to Kill, and One Policeman's Lights and Sirens, about which the author says, "This is true police work. There is no Superman costume here." He currently has several nonfiction projects underway: Steps into God's Country, Women, Whiskey, and Sin. This series of books will educate readers about the arduous felony cases and life here in West Texas. Another thing I want to say is I want to put my own 2 cents worth in about Russell. I have known Russell for many, many years. Him and I are best friends. We have worked in the same 10-by-10 office for years. And I guarantee you that there's no better person in the world than Russell Smith. And I want y'all to please welcome him as our guest speaker today.
I did publish Steps into God's Country as well already, and how I published 4 books in 6 years, kind of a training manual that I use when I talk to writers club. But today I would like to talk to you about researching a time of women, whiskey, and sin. Kind of give you an idea of where that came from. My grandson on the right, Matthew, was born prematurely in Alpine. I was supposed to speak at St. Ross about The Gun That Wasn't There, which of course has been my most successful book and still the top seller. But anyway, he came so early that he was a preemie and they had to come from El Paso to get him, and the family had to go. But I was supposed to speak, but I had a day in the middle. So anyway, they gave me a day to go to Alpine and to go to the district courthouse and to look through the records. And in the meantime, I had was researching No Reason to Kill about the death of Sheila Gay Elrod on February the 12th, 1980, in the jewelry store where Henry's Diner is now. And in doing so, I interviewed Bob Bluehart about what was San Angelo back during the day when it first started. And he said San Angelo was women, whiskey, and sin, bartenders, and harlots. So that first sentence first part of that kind of stuck with me. So when I'm studying those old records out there in Alpine, I started thinking about it, and I started getting all these books, and I started researching. Now, those of you that have been around me some know that I use 3-ring binders. I have to see it, feel it, touch it. My wife has the Kindle, not me. But anyway, I started putting books together and started getting pictures. That's actually Jake and Don Young. Don's passed away now, but he's Roy Cooper's father-in-law. And that's their dad. And of course, they're at the Judge Roy Bean's place many, many years ago. Jake's 83 now. He's the tall one on the right in that picture. But I started gathering stuff like that. Here's a picture of the Zentner's Saloon from Rowena. So I started gathering history. I bought old files from the San Angelo Standard-Times, and I mean I bought a ton of stuff about all kinds of things that have happened. I bought the Hattie files from the Standard-Times, and there's some of the pictures that they had in the deal. The Hattie Legend paper, I have a copy of that. But unfortunately, there was a mistake. In going to Brewster County, what I found a bunch of arrests for violation by people having houses of prostitution. In those arrests that I found, the that's kind of what gave me the idea, because they had a bunch of them out there. But the mistake is I opened my big mouth about it, and I put it on that business card, and I put the Women, Whiskey, and Sin series, and then when I was doing talks like this, I told people the first book would probably come out of Alpine. But when I went back to get it all, it was gone. We haven't found the district court docket book that I looked at, and we haven't found the actual cases. I have a scanner, and I take it with me, and I scan stuff now instead of buying copies because they're pretty expensive. And but anyway, to make a long story short, either somebody decided they want to do it themselves, I don't know what, because they're the nicest people out there. But anyway, so they're gone, so I didn't get to do it about them. So then I went to Coke County, and we copied those records there, the first 89, but I end up in the West Texas collection. This is my wife's, and that's my scanner. It's a ledger-size scanner. Those are the first 100 felony cases ever in Tom Green County. Those are district court records that were put over there, basically, I guess, early on because of space, even though right now our county has a wonderful record system and records manager. If you look right there on the bottom left, that is one of the records out of one of the files. There's all kinds of pages, and a lot of the documents are there. My wife's scanning them, then I'm taking them and reading through them, and I'm documenting stuff in my laptop there on the left. So it was the first 100 felony, actually it's 101. I put 100, but there it is, 1 through 1875 to 1878. And there again, there's many pages in some jackets, so scanning them is not a few-hour deal. It's a days and weeks deal. We were in Coke County to do 89. It took us, I think, about 7 days, and we got to know all those people personally up there. And anyway, we're all on first name basis. Linda scans, and I read. We dealt with a lot of issues in gathering this information, and one was the Ben Ficklin flood. In 1882, some have said the wall of water was as high as 50 feet that rolled through there. But what happened is a lot of those records ended up being either washed away or washed in all the sludge. And you can still see not only the watermark, but the mud mark on some of the records that we're trying to deal with. This is the earliest paper that I was able to find about the flood. And pictures like these are some of the 73 that we have in the book. In the records are grand jury indictments, handwritten warrants, and that was kind of funny because everything is handwritten back then, basically, because they don't have the technology, they don't have out here society hadn't gotten to that point. Here is a subpoena, and I wanted y'all to see this out of Gillespie County, and they just marked Gillespie out and write Tom Green in. They borrowed it. Some case that will still do it. One of the most interesting things to me, especially being that I was the Justice of the Peace, was the judge's charge to the jury. Every case, the judge wrote out a charge to the jury. And what was so interesting to me about all these documents, they're all very, very similar even to what we do today. Very similar. There's Judge Alan Blacker's signature, and they would come, they were out of El Paso, and they would come. We didn't have a train, so they came by horseback or by stage, and they would hold court, and they would check all the records of the county court to make sure that everything was right, and then they would sign off on it. And while they were here, the 2 times during the year, they would hold all the trials for the felony cases. Here's a verdict, and I think it says 2 years confinement in the state penitentiary down there. And this is Ragsdale, the brother of the famous photographer Ragsdale from San Angelo, that was the foreman of the jury. William S. Beck foreman of the grand jury, and he was the foreman of the very first grand jury. And some of you may not know, but we actually have a vet street. And the one thing that really kind of grabbed me in all of these records is that the names of the people, many of them were the names of our streets today, are the military commanders of the streets that are named have streets, especially in Santa Rita. Most of those are military from Fort Concho. Also had to deal with water stain. This isn't in the first 25 felony cases, but the Tweedy Ranch is very visible there, right about in the middle, just below that big smudge. And so you have to deal with those type things, and sometimes by putting them in a computer and changing the contrast back and forth, you may be able to read a word that you couldn't read otherwise. Bless Bess Nasworthy's heart. Of course, never met that particular Nasworthy lady, but I'm going to tell y'all something. If she kept scrapbooks on everything, newspaper articles, I mean, just everything on earth. And many of the things that are in my book, the first book, Women, Whiskey, and Sin, Part 1, came out of tidbits that were written in newspapers during that time, way back when, that she had in her scrapbooks. This is Isaac Mullins, was a justice in Tom Green County, but also became a legislator out of Tom Green County. This is the type of thing she had. But bless her heart again, the one thing she didn't ever put is the date of the newspaper. So very seldom did we have a date of the newspaper. One thing that's real interesting is the oldest JP book, and I haven't been to El Paso yet, but I plan on going to look in the records there because our district courts, those district judges were there, and I don't know what happened to our early JP books. And Judge Howard today, I've been all over his office and everybody's trying to find way back in the 1870s. But we do have Judge Nemitz's book, so my final chapter in my book, Women, Whiskey, and Sin, came out of Judge Nemitz's book. This is one of his pages. Everything, again, is handwritten. I mean, everything. Back then, women were not arrested for prostitution, they were arrested for vagrancy. And this is Lizzie. And in each one of the docket entries, most of those out of that book that were dealing with prostitution or gambling are in my book. I transcribed the majority of the cases. Not only did we scan them, but I transcribed them word for word into Microsoft Word. The reason I did that is I realized that trying to pull them up on a computer and look at them later, I might as well go back and do them. So I went back to the West Texas collection, spent 2 weeks, and did the first 50 in Microsoft Word. Then I went over to the fort, and this is Evelyn Lemons, the historian over there, very knowledgeable lady, great lady, and she helped me with a lot of things with her knowledge and her information over there. One of them dealt with the telegraph message. This is a telegraph message. It's actually in a later case, beyond the 25th case, but this is where they're taking bond. They took bond for a guy that was wanted over here, and they took the bond over, and I believe it's San Sabas, what it says up there at the top. So it's kind of neat, and it's also written to James D. Spears, and I'll get back to him in a minute. Also, she showed me the Tankersley lawsuit, which was really interesting because what happens is R.F. Tankersley sues the federal government, the Comanches, and the Kiowa Indians for stealing his cattle. And he wins. A third. Basically a third. But his lawsuit doesn't happen until around the turn of the century. But the reason that I went ahead and got it, number one, I was there. Number two, that way it would be scanned and on a disc. And then number three, or on a USB drive. And then number 3 is they took depositions about that time that I was talking about. They talked to people about, because that's when he's suing them. He's suing them from back during the time, many years before. And there's their scanner over there, where I spent about a day and a half. Then I went to the Tom Green County District Clerk's office. What happened in those records is there were very few dispositions. Unlike you today, where you would go to the district clerk's office and look up the records and retrieve them, those case files don't have dispositions in them like they would in today's world. So I had to go to their office and do the same thing all again. So I again take my big scanner over there, and some of you might have seen me with a dolly, and because this is a great big thing. I mean, it's not like I want to carry it. And but anyway, I set it up and I did go through the records. This is the court minutes, Book A, and they have all of them over there. They've all been rewritten because remember there was a big flood later, and so in the rewriting, I think it's probably a lot more legible, but there is a discrepancy right off. Case number 1, John Massey, is case number 1 in the files, that book with 100 cases in it. But in the minutes, it's against William Mingus, who loves watermelons. They are, I think it says destruction of, I can't see it, growing, but anyway, products. But all in the records, I guess it was older kids and they were stealing watermelons. So there's quite a number of entries that deal with the watermelon issue. But there it is. But they show 2 different cases for case number 1. It also showed the jury and the list of payments. It's kind of interesting, $2 a day, which was a lot of money back then. I mean, a lot of money back then. This is case number 25, and I did stop there in gathering this first. For me to do book number 2, I'll have to go to the district clerk's office and go back through them again. So what do you do with it all once you get it? Well, 73 photographs and tidbits were added to the cases. Now this right here is out of there's a book that deals with our census, and our Tom Green County Historical Society, they put together a book out of the census, the big census book that dealt just with us. So this is one of the examples. D.W. Dodge was a stock raiser. That was a rancher who was 29 in 1875. His wife was Vanilla, and they were in the 1880 census of 13. And the Historical Society still put this out. And I went to a garage sale or an estate sale, and they had a huge box of these, and I bought one. And this is before I did the book. But I wish I'd have bought them all, because those were the ones that the Historical Society was originally selling for a certain amount of money. Because it was the lady that passed away, she's the one that put it all together. So it's kind of interesting. He was the road overseer by the commissioner, appointed by the Commissioner's Court in 1877. And kind of like today, we have our road and bridge groups, and they're still around. James D. Spears could easily be the topic of a book all by himself. One thing I've learned about this guy, he's in a lot of books already. He was a true gunfighter. I don't know as much as a shootist, except that he didn't miss. In one of the books about Sharp's rifles and the overland stage, he was one of those early stage riders. And there's stories that talk about him running Indians off and that were trying to kill 2 soldiers when he had his Winchester. In my book, I described that early Winchester. Odell Wagner was the sheriff that originally let me into the Tom Green County Sheriff's Reserve. And he wrote in an article, he said to the reporter in an article, he was the first sheriff got his badge in 1875. Well, that isn't necessarily true. As you corroborate this, you find out there's two others. But according to Wagner, Spear was a legendary Indian fighter with a deadly aim. And there's no doubt about that, because he's written about in many different books. He just didn't back down and didn't miss. That's the main thing. I got pictures from people from here. Tina DeLong gave me her picture of Watch DeLong, and in stories. I mean, there's stories about these people, and this is all part of our history from here. And if you didn't grow up here, and I didn't, I grew up in Uvalde. But to me, it's interesting to learn that, you know, Art Tankersley came here first, and he's out here fighting Indians and raising cattle, and there's nothing here. And then we build this big fort, and then we have other people come one by one, and then all of a sudden we've got a dairy that's over there by Lone Wolf across the river. But you may not think of it this way, because today we just drive there in seconds. But it was a trip to go over there to the dairy. So, Ben Ficklin, amazing story. In one of the books it just says that he died of an illness. And when I got to researching it in Barbara Barton's book, I learned that he was actually in Washington, and he was lobbying for the post office and to keep the mail coming through here. And he ate fish, got a bone stuck in his throat. When they tried to get it out, he hemorrhaged and he died. This is Judge Prizer. There's two pictures of him in the book, and I put them so you can see the differences. And again, Prizer Street, being a policeman, all these streets just jumped out at me. Of course, the first Tom Green County Jail. The guy on the right, that is James D. Spears. And you know, in my book at the end, I have things to go see in there. And one of the things I tell you to do is to go visit your Tom Green County Sheriff's Department, because in the foyer, you don't have to go in, and it's not where the jail is. Just go down there. When you go in, they have pictures that were painted by Jimmy Cox back whenever he was a deputy. Some of those pictures, the eyes follow you around. Of course, he was very talented. But James D. Spears, his picture's painted, and I assume that maybe Jimmy took it off there. I tried to find where some of those pictures came from, because I wanted to find the originals and try to use them. But to this day, I talked to Golden Foster, all kinds of people. But anyway, the guy on the right is James D. Spears. There's the Nasworthy Saloon and Restaurant, and of course I knew Tom Nasworthy and then John, and the book is partially dedicated to their memory, as well as Miss Tucker, Eva Tucker. They're the three people the book is dedicated to. There's other saloons in the book, pictures in the book. Now, I want to thank each one of you that if you were on Facebook, this is the first one we did on Facebook, but all the books, all the covers have been voted on by the public, because, you know, I'm a retired city employee back before they tried to balance it, average it with other cities, and I made about a whole lot less than those others, so I don't have any money to hire a marketing firm. So you are my marketing firm. So anyway, this book won first. This was the one that had the most votes, and so it's the one that we used first. This was the second one with the Tom Green County Courthouse. This courthouse was built after the flood at Ben Ficklin. The reason we didn't use that first, because there was a lot of folks that liked that, was that the book people that actually sell the books, said that courthouse, the way that cover is, there's not enough contrast for them to be able to do an ad. So this will be, the background's going to be changed, but the courthouse is going to stay the same when I get around to doing the second book. The third one is Nasworthy's Livery Stable. And then the fourth one, I don't know what we're going to do because the book people say that color alone is just it's not what you do nonfiction in normally. So I know what she was trying to do, the lady in Austin. She is a professional. She's very good. She's worked for Hope Reinhardt. But she was trying to show the whiskey. So this is the way they come when you self-publish. Of course, they're also on Amazon and on Kindle. But that's the way they end up in your living room, and your wife saying, "What are they doing in there?" So, but anyway, there's other things to come. There's a lot of murders, but there's not near as many as what was mentioned. I mean, it was written in the newspaper that we had so many murders that, you know, you didn't know if there was any good people in town. Well, that wasn't really, the records don't prove out the talk in the newspaper. There is the actual certificate for the first pardon out of the governor's office. Real interested in later cases. Mental health cases are really interesting. The woman under the wagon case, Judge Gossett told me he believes that case was appealed. Now we're talking about way back, this will probably be in 77, but it may have been appealed, and if it is, I'm going to have to go to Austin and try to get the final tally on that, because we haven't been able to locate the case. One of the local law firms did have it at one time. There's also a Buffalo case, and for many of you may not know, we had Buffalo all over us during those times. And this is a case where these guys have killed some buffalo, and some people ride up on them and start shooting them. I mean, it's just, things happen. So that's where we are. And I do have some here. If y'all are interested, they're $20 a piece. But if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them, either about the book or any of the books or anything from the past.
What about making a movie out of the book?
Okay. What's happened with The Gun That Wasn't There is, which has been my most successful book. In fact, Monday I saw more of it than any others, and I spoke to teachers about how you document history. But what happened was we finally learned that you need, it's called several things. We call it a bullet letter, and I mailed it to Hollywood to all the same people we'd mail books to, and we kept getting them back. Or not getting them back at all, just didn't hear nothing. And we finally got letters from attorneys back that said we get sued constantly for plagiarism. So for us to read your book, we need you to submit it to an agent with the Screenwriters Guild. Now, if you're on Facebook, you may know that I just recently completed a screenwriting course, which came after reading that Screenwriting for Dummies, which was a good book too, but it wasn't near what you need. And because the formatting of the screenplay is very important when you're submitted to somebody that knows what they're looking at, especially when you don't. So anyway, The Gun That Wasn't There, right now I'm at the point where I have my outline done, I'm ready to put it together. I do understand now why when you read a book, you don't have it all in the other, because you have 120 pages. For those of you that have read The Gun That Wasn't There, there's a meeting between the sheriff and the bandit in chapter 13, and it doesn't work out the way the sheriff wants. And just to show you in screenwriting, that has to be the end of the first 30 pages. I mean, that's an amazing thing. So the manhunt that is 9 months long has to cover 60 pages, and then the end has to happen in the last 30 pages. So that may not mean a lot until you get out, sit down and start to write it. It's a big deal. So anyway, I've got to get an armed robbery over in the Hill Country done, and I've got to get the postmaster shot at Pumpville, and I got to get the sheriff shot, all within 30 pages. But chapter 13 is nearly halfway through the book. So anyway, but that's what I'm doing with The Gun That Wasn't There. I've had an amazing ride with that book, and while we're here, I would like to thank Brad about one thing, because I'm sitting here. He does have a screenwriter in the family, and they have delivered copies and all that. But in my books, I've actually gone to some screenwriters, but the point I was going to get at is when Gary Elrod got sick, I was just going to tell y'all, Gary and I were very close.
Gary is who? Tell him.
Elrod. It's Sheila Elrod's brother. And whenever I got ready to do the book, No Reason to Kill, that whole event, if you've ever read the book, in the epilogue, some of that emotion is there. In fact, a lot of it. And what happened was, I got very close to Gary. Well, Gary ended up getting sick. And I really haven't seen Brad since until today, but I just wanted to thank him for what he did to help Gary during a time when he needed it. Because we lost Gary. And then in Steps into God's Country, there's a chapter, and that's another book I've written, and I do have it. But I wrote a chapter called Goodbye, My Friend. If you don't believe that the Lord works in mysterious ways, I will tell you that bluebird skies, after a cold front blows in, the next day, those bluebird skies, sometimes it's the hardest time to catch a bass. I don't know what it is, they go hide everywhere. But Gary had never caught a bass on a lure, ever. And I take him to Amstead. He takes a rod and reel with braided line and about 30 feet of line because he thinks we're going to catfish. I said, no, Gary, we're going to catch a bass. That morning, Parks and Wildlife people are eating breakfast when we get ready to go out, and they tell me, you know, Russell, it's bluebird skies. I said, I sure do. His first fish weighed 3 pounds. And his last fish weighed $6.99 or so. So the good Lord does work sometimes to help people. They're in a time when it really needs to help. So thank y'all very much. And I'm very glad to have been here today.
Russell, don't listen. It's been a month for you for all that stuff.
Oh, you did? Okay.
It's a big one.
Oh, great.
That's almost as big as you are, isn't it?
It sure is. But I can get a ladder and stand up and look at it.